At work, it can feel like stress is coming from deadlines, meetings, and expectations. But what if the pressure you feel isn't actually coming from the outside world? I'm Luke Richardson, and this is Wave Work Stress Goodbye, a podcast exploring the inside out understanding and how seeing how our minds work can transform the way we experience work, pressure, and performance. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today, I'm delighted to welcome marriage expert Dr. Lee Baucom to the podcast. Lee is a relationship coach, author, speaker, and the founder of Save the Marriage. For many years, he has helped individuals and couples navigate relationship challenges, reconnect with what matters most, and create healthier, more fulfilling lives. What particularly interests me about Lee's work is his focus on resilience, personal growth, and the way our understanding can transform both our relationships and our experience of life. I'm looking forward to exploring his insights and hearing more about the principles behind his work. Lee, welcome to Wave Work Stress Goodbye.
Oh, Luke, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
No, pleasure's all mine. So, for the benefit of me and the listeners, what first drew you into helping people with relationships?
Well, we're surrounded by them, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
see them everywhere around us. So I, looking back, realized that a lot of it was watching some pretty ugly divorces that happened in my extended family. My parents are happily married, and I grew up watching a happy marriage. My grandparents, same thing, but had an uncle and a couple of aunts that kind of set a different stage for their process. And I remember as a child just going, what's going on here? I mean, they were imploding or exploding their relationships. And I was intrigued by the difference between like watching my parents and these other families, and how destructive it could be, and how much pain it was causing to my grandparents, to my aunts and uncles, my parents, to my cousins. I mean, just multiple levels of pain. So when I was in college, I realized I wanted to be a therapist. At that point, I wasn't sure exactly how that would line up, and I wanted to be a therapist. So that meant grad school for me. And after two masters and a PhD, I did both individual training as an individual therapist, and then kind of got interested in marriage and family therapy, which is a systems approach, takes it outside of that individual. So I had a lot of background in what happens to individuals and in what happens in systems. And that became my specialty until I got frustrated with the inefficiencies of marriage therapy and switched over to relationship coaching.
Oh, excellent. As I say, like you say, it's everywhere. And I guess from a young age, you saw I guess, the ugly side of relationships from quite a young age, and that must have been the influence of why you do what you do.
I think a lot of it is. I've never really pinned that down until, I mean, it's maybe a decade ago. I was going, okay, why is it that I keep going? How can we help marriages? I mean, like, what drives that other than the fact that, just on a kind of a logical level, a rational level, we can all go, wow, people who go through those situations are in pain and create pain in others around them, but peripherally and in a much more real way, I saw the destruction in my own family, and that really brings it to a pointed level for me. I have cousins that I don't know where they are because they exploded away from the family so far. So that's the level of destruction that can happen pretty easily. I mean, these are not bad people that were or were not bad people that it happened to. And that's the thing I noticed. There are lots of good people who are struggling to have happy marriages, and that raises the question of how do we do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree that there's good in people. It's just masked by the misunderstandings that they're going through when they're trying to hold a relationship with somebody. And that kind of moves me on to my next point. What are the big challenges facing couples today? I guess not much has changed. We'll get on to more modern times later, but I guess there's a lot of challenges that were, say, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years ago that we still have today. Can you elaborate on what challenges most couples face? at the
Well,
moment?
one of the changes in prior times was that if you were married by necessity, for a number of reasons, it was going to be hard to leave, and that's no longer the case. So that's why we see the spike in divorces. But I don't think the underlying issue has changed a whole lot. Certainly not in the time that I've been in practice. So, a change that was kind of on the forefront. So, just to kind of put a reference point to this, I started training in the late '80s, finished in the mid '90s. So, long span there, and that was as we were getting more and more clarity on, for instance, in the US, no fault divorces where somebody could say, I'm out and there's no way to challenge that. And so there were easier paths. And we were also watching a transformation in workforce where women felt like not only could they, but they would want to be in high level jobs. And that was a change that was certainly different when I was a kid, where women could work, but many chose not to. And so there were some changes in economics and changes in society that were going on. But that that's not really, I think, the bigger issue of why people hit divorce, because I remember as a child watching my friends' parents who seemed bound together but completely unhappy. And I think that they were held together by these reasons, but that didn't mean their marriage was good. They were just stuck together. And so now we have a change. But so let's track a little bit where I think that we have some misunderstandings that have left people stuck. One of the things that has been the centerpiece for marriage therapy and for a lot of marriage books and information has been about communication. And so a lot of times you'll watch things talking about how to be a better communicator in your marriage. And that's not the problem. And that is a symptom of the problem that often gets us stuck. When I was working as a therapist, I was looking for the problems that brought people in around their arguments around money and kids and religion and in-laws and sex. And those were what were brought up in therapy, but they're still symptoms of the problem. And that's why we have such bad results. So couples fall into this same trap repeatedly, and nobody has been pointing to the trap in any way that helps them get out of that trap. And that's part of what I've been trying to do is build a roadmap for people to go, oh, that's what's going on, and how do you get out of that?
I think it's interesting what you say about women. That's very true. Decades ago, women didn't really um, have the opportunity to have the careers they do today. And as time's gone on, they've had a career, a corporate career, very successfully. And that's been a challenge, hasn't it, for couples? Because before you had women that kind of, stayed at home, looked after the kids, but now you have very successful women who are going out to work, earning the money, being the breadwinners, in some respect. And I guess that's been a new challenge for couples to negotiate, especially if they're both working full time with children. That could cause some potential friction.
So that itself is probably what gave opportunities for people who were unhappy to leave marriages.
Yeah.
That it opened up that bridge. It I don't think it has been the problem maker that some people would want it to be, as much as it's the problem revealer for a lot of places, and certainly the place where somebody could say, "Hey, I don't need this. I can take care of myself." And that was not true until fairly recent times. I mean, in the span of history, more recent times. And so, is it a friction point? Yeah, but the friction it's showing is an underlying issue already. So I think that what we're doing is watching something that's revealed some issues and allowed for people to make choices that were not available earlier on. So you want to jump into what actually is that underlying issue?
Yes, yes. Let's go. Let's go on.
Let's do that. Okay, so let's go back in time for a couple. So people find each other, right? They find somebody and they go, "Wow, that's this person is interesting to me, attractive to me. I want to know more about them."
Mm,
And when that is reciprocated, that begins this process of building a relationship. And how do we build a relationship? By connecting with each other, by sharing more of ourselves, by wanting to know more about the other person. And so building the connection. And so as that goes on, they build up this connection. And at some point, they say, you know what? Let's make this for life. Let's go ahead and get married and spend our lives together. And and so what they are acknowledging is that they believe that they have this relationship thing kind of nailed down. They've got this. And I know this because I used to see a lot of couples before they got married. And in fact, if they were going to get married in seven of the larger places of faith in the community where my office was, they came through my doors and they had to see me for three visits. That was the minister said, this is not our skill set. We'll turn them over to you. Three sessions, come back. And so on the sly, one of my jobs was to pick a fight between them because they come in going, yep, we're good. You know, we don't need this. Some would go, yeah, I'm hoping that maybe we'll learn a few things, but I think we're good. Very few came in saying, we really need help with this because if they felt that way, they would not be getting married for the most part. Few exceptions. And so I would ask the question, okay, if I'm walking down the street now, you're in UK, you can tell me if the stats are any different, but if I walk down in the United States and I pulled somebody off the street and said, what are the chances of a marriage succeeding? They would probably say somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-50. It's not quite that, but it's roughly that.
yeah, he's probably getting like that in his country as well. To be
Yeah.
honest, yeah, yeah,
Okay, so let's call it that, right? And so
50-50, yeah.
it's fit. Let's call it a coin toss. And so I would say to the couple, you know that, you know the statistics, especially if you're getting married, you're reading stuff and seeing that, you know that. So I just wonder, why is it that you think you've already beat the statistics? Because if you didn't think you could beat the statistics, you would not be doing that. You'd be
Absolutely.
trying to figure out what to do, right? And so they already think they've beat the statistics. Why is that? And to a person, they would say, oh, because we have real love. Now, the built in assumption is the marriages that failed did not have real love. And that's not the problem. So they go in with the same thing. And the reason I know that is because I would see people a few years down the line who believed they had real love, who are now in my office going, I don't know if I even like this person. And so I know that it's not the love that does it. And that raised the question for me of, okay, what happens? Like, how do we go from, I want to spend the rest of my life to, I don't want to see you? What is that transformation? And it's a very simple and very innocent mistake that couples make. And I call it hitting the pause button. And what I mean by that is they go, you know, we spent all of our time building up our relationship, building up our connection. But now we've got that. So now we need to take the energy we were putting into all of that and put it into parenting, career, hobbies, interests, friends, aging parents, something else that was kind of sidelined along the way. And so they go from building these habits of connecting, that's how they built that connection, to habits of disconnecting, of disconnection. And that leads down this path and they don't notice it for a while. And part of the reason they don't notice it is because you get momentum. Like your confidence that you've got this is enough momentum to carry you through for a while and not notice the damage that's being done as you're devoting all of your attention and focus and energy on these other things that are plenty worthwhile. It's just the level of attention and focus that's being taken off the marriage is dangerous. And so that's compounded by one fact. As you're building up these habits of disconnection, you're always pushing the when we'll get back to us. Because I've heard this many times. People are like, oh, you know, we thought it was temporary. We knew we would get back to us. And they didn't because they always were like thinking, you know, when the kids are at another stage, like okay, the kids are children now, babies now. Once we get them out of diapers, then we can start date night and get back to us. Once they're in school, we'll have more time, we'll have more freedom, we'll be
I
able to
can
do
relate
things.
to
Once
that,
they're
but yeah.
Yeah, right. And it
Yeah.
keeps going, right?
Yeah.
And you just keep watching it stack up once they're in college, whatever. And then suddenly you're like, well, once the grandkids are older, we'll have time for us, right? Job. Once I get to here, then I can, put more energy back into our relationship. Well, maybe when it's here, because there's always something else that's driving that. We need more. You want to go to a certain level until they say, well, after we retire, we'll be able to get back to us, which is a long
Yeah.
journey to be apart.
Yeah.
And so while they think that they are just tracking along and they think that their relationship is kind of in suspended animation, which isn't true for any relationship. It doesn't work out for science fiction movies and it doesn't work out for a marriage. So that suspended animation is actually a process of disconnection. And that's not neutral. That's damaging because we humans are connecting creatures, probably more so than any other creature on the planet. And so we need that connection. It's not just that we want it, we desperately need it. In fact, the research about when we feel like we don't have that connection, when we feel like there's some rejection, which is what we feel as a person when there is a disconnection between us, we feel some rejection that triggers in our brain it lights up the same place it does if you hurt something. It like physically hurt something. Stub your toe, it lights up the same part of the brain as feeling rejected. So it's a very painful experience. And when we're in pain, we end up being very self-focused. Like I'm not getting the connection I need from this person. Not, well, we're just not connecting the way we need to. We need to change that. It's why are you not connecting with me? And so we go from this neutral, they think, hit the pause button, do these other things, we'll get back to us, to this negative, you're not wanting to connect with me. And the spiral begins to take him down further and further.
Yeah. It sounds like what you've described is when you've described about people coming in to see you before they get married and when they're about to get married and the journey that you described about the disconnection happening. It what you just described to me just sounds like a recipe for disaster for a marriage because people are just going separate ways. And like you say, they've got this excuse of, oh, when this happens, we'll get back together. And before they know it, they're different people and they don't know each other
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. And so the different people is what happens to us through our lives. We are different people. Years ago, I had this person who came in and he said, "My wife keeps telling me I've changed, and I need you to explain to her that I haven't changed." And I was like, "If you haven't changed, there's another problem here. You've missed an opportunity because you should be changing. The problem is you're not tracking together on the changes." And so when you start here, if you're staying in connection, you watch each other grow and you kind of change your relationship based on that. But if you're not connected, the growth goes like this. And then at some point you're looking over going, wait, I didn't know you thought that. I didn't know you believed that. I didn't know you saw things this way. I didn't know you wanted this in life. I don't know you. And so the path has diverged until you're going, I don't know who this person is. And then we hear the things, in court, it's irreconcilable differences. That is two different viewpoints that have emerged along the way until they can't see their way back to each other.
No, that's very interesting. And it's interesting you've said that because I thought that in my own marriage recently that the 22-year-old version of me when my wife first met me would not go down well, went down well with my wife today. I've changed over the years have gone. But as you say, she's changed it as well, but we've changed together to a point where our relationship still works well and better than it ever has done because we've been changing together and we understand each other. Whereas if the opposite happens, where I've seen people in the UK, men more than women, get with women, and it's as if it's been like, oh, seal the deal, and that's it now. Like I've done the hard bit, and then they've kind of like dossed around, gone drinking, carried on gambling, done all those habits that they kind of got away with when they were younger, but because they're
Yeah.
stuck with them and not changed as the relationship's gone on, it's kind of made it go a bit wayward and, as I said, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, a lot of people assume that I've got it locked down now,
Yeah,
so we're good is all that has to happen. And that does carry things for a while. They just don't know that it's wiping out. It's kind of like if you build a platform on like a sand on the beach and you're like, okay, we got the platform forever, and the waves keep coming in and taking out the sand from under it. Eventually it collapses because you never knew that that was happening. You weren't building down and reinforcing and taking care of that. And so suddenly it all crashes in, and the people are going, I don't know what happened. We seem so happy. We never argued, and like that's not a sign of health. Not necessarily a sign of dishealth, but it's not a sign of health that you're not arguing. And that's what people assume, because a lot of times when they're not arguing, it's because they're not talking, they're not
yeah,
communicating,
absolutely.
they're just going through the motions.
And seeing that as a good thing when it's not a good thing because they don't argue. Arguing maybe better because at least you communicate with one another than just not talking at all.
Well, so let's go down that a little bit, because I hear a lot from people who are like, well, I don't like to argue. We don't argue, so we must be okay. And my core belief is that if you have two people, you have two perspectives, and that brings more reality to the reality, right? You have a clearer view of what's actually going on, as long as you're willing to use both perspectives to kind of measure things. And so arguments should be inevitable. And the question is not whether you have those disagreements, but whether you see the conflict that comes from that as being a way of furthering and improving the relationship, or if it is an actually you against me
Yeah.
approach. So for me, a marriage, one of the signs of a healthy marriage is that they're working together as a team. They see each other as a team. I call it being a we, like we see our jointness together. Like I'm bringing my best self to this, right? I bring myself because I know there's this entity of us, of we, of being on the team. And so an argument that furthers that connection, that we, is helpful for the process. But if you don't see that, if you don't see the team, it's you versus me. I do believe that if you put humans together, they're either going to naturally turn towards each other or they're going to turn against each other. That's what happens when you have two people. And so the question is whether a couple decides to turn toward each other or if it becomes that against each other.
The work I do, Lee, I basically, as you mentioned in the email when you wrote to me, I talk about perspectives from the inside out. How often have you seen a couple where someone's been adamant that the other person is at fault and blaming them for this, blaming them for that, and kind of had an insight of kind of had an insight in the end of going, oh, maybe the problem was me all along. How I perceived it, how I felt about it, and the marriage has blossomed from that point. Have you ever seen that before?
Sure, yes. A lot of times it takes something that wakes them up for them to have that revelation.
Yeah.
Somebody is able to say, wait a minute, look at this. I don't know how in UK Jimmy Buffett is, but I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan here and so his famous song Margaritaville, it starts with, it's nobody's fault. And then it moves to, well, it could be my fault. And then the last part is, yeah, it's my fault. And that is a piece of that. And so I'm not looking for people actually to end up with this is my fault as much as be able to say this piece of this is my responsibility. I am going to take this on to change. And so, for instance, when I'm coaching people through apologizing, I'm not saying you have to say, this is all my fault. This is the mea culpa. It's all on me. It's all my fault. But you do need to be able to say, this portion of this is my responsibility. I was part of this process. And so it's my responsibility to walk that back, to find a way back. That responsibility, one of my favorite words, responsibility, that I have the ability to respond differently, right? So I have the responsibility of doing that. And until somebody can accept that. So if your frame is not my fault, your fault, what can you possibly do? There's you don't have any piece of that. So it's all on the other person. That's what comes out of that. And so when people tell me that, I'm like, okay, well then you have nothing you can do. There's no way back for you because you've excluded yourself from the process. And that's not the case very often. It is rarely the case that one person is fully responsible and the other person is just the innocent bystander because they're in a relationship. There's a dance that they're doing together, which, by the way, is why one person can help change things around because they are part of that dance.
I was looking at your website earlier and looking at we can talk about your books in a lot more depth later in the recording, but one that caught my eye was the affair one. It was Recovering from
Recovering
the
from the
Affair.
affair.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the one. And it got me thinking about what we've kind of just discussed in this little section now. Um, Two people, one of them has an affair. The affair is long, long done, and the other person can't forgive that person. And it got me thinking. I'm not condoning any behavior from the person who had the affair, but at that point, it has to be the fault of the other person. Well, not the fault, that's the wrong word, but the responsibility of the other person because they can't let the pain of the other person having an affair go. And until they've done that, the relationship can't recover. Would you agree on
So let's unfold a couple of pieces of that onion. There's a
that?
lot of layers to it. So let's pull back a couple. My basic belief is that for the majority of affairs, it happens because of that disconnection. The exception are those who have addictive elements in their life. They're addicted to the romance, the relationship, the sex, the whatever. And so they tend to repeat that process a numerous times because the problem with addiction is you just keep feeding it and it keeps growing. So now I'm talking about more the typical. There are two elements that go into somebody having an affair. One is there's a disconnected relationship that creates the vulnerability. And then there's a lack of boundaries where they don't protect the relationship. Now, the lack of boundaries and not protecting the relationship is the sole responsibility of the one who had the affair. But being part of that disconnected relationship, that's two people being a part of the disconnected relationship that puts the relationship at risk. Now, to go back a little bit, I said that we as humans need that connection. And if the connection is not being fed in that primary relationship of the marriage, we will find substitutes. Over involvement with our kids, over involvement at work, over involvement in hobbies and friends, and all these other places where we're trying to get that place where we feel like, and this is the underlying piece of that, we matter. That's what drives a piece of that. I need that connection, lets me know that I matter to somebody and they matter to me, right? So that's what we're trying to get to. And so some people find the more destructive way of getting to that connection with finding an affair. I don't know how many times I wish I got, a penny, a dollar, whatever, for every time somebody said to me, my spouse who's cheating always felt like an affair was the worst thing you could do to a marriage, and they swore they would never do it, and here they are cheating. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. When we don't have the connection we need, we can rationalize behavior if we're not careful. That's why we have clear boundaries, or should have clear boundaries to protect the relationship. The vulnerability of the relationship was from that disconnection. So now let's move forward to the other layers you're talking about of I can't forgive my
Yeah.
spouse. So there are a couple of layers to forgiveness. And one of them is that people misunderstand it. They think if they forgive somebody, they will be letting them off the hook. And in reality, you forgive so that you let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
You don't have to walk around being held by that event. And so when people come in and they'll say, I will not forgive that person. And I'm like, then you're handing them all the power. As
Yeah.
long as you do that, you're handing them the power because there is a difference between forgiving and having no consequences. And there's a difference between forgiving and having to trust again or reconcile with somebody or anything else. Those are independent factors. So you can choose to forgive somebody in anywhere in life, not just marriage, but anywhere in life, and say, but I'm not going to get near that person again. I forgive them, so I'm not going to continue to be wounded by it, but I'm not allowing them back in my life. And that they're separate, right? And so a lot of times people kind of put all of this together and get confused. So is it possible to stay married after an affair? Yes. In fact, I was looking at stats recently, and this is one of those it's really hard to get to for because people have a hard time talking about these things, but somewhere between 65 and about 75% of people who have affairs in their relationship do go on, depending on how they handle it. Go on married, they stay married, depending on how it's handled. And depending on factors in that affair, like how long it lasted and all these other pieces that go into these. So statistics are just broad numbers, but more people stay married after an affair than don't. And so they might be limping along and still just not able to leave. But it's also possible that they've actually moved through a process that I've seen many times where both people are able to say, hey, we were a part of this disconnected relationship that put this at risk. And for the person to say, and I was responsible for breaking the boundaries of the relationship. And now I have to repair that. And I have to repair trust. And we have to figure out how to reconnect. But that makes it no longer a one way, you're bad, you had the affair. It's now a we were a part of this.
It's that key word again, isn't it? We, that you said before, the we.
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Um, can we elaborate on that further and talk? I was going to actually save this for the near the end of the recording actually, but it feels like an appropriate time to mention it with talking about infidelities and frictions in relationships. So let's talk about more modern things now when it comes to relationships. The rise in social media, the rise in accessible pornography. That's more accessible than ever before. Um, in your with couples, do you have any concerns about the impact of the mass of smartphones, social media, excessive pornography, and how concerned are you about all that with when it comes to making marriages work? Because the way I see it, that kind of content is that kind of stuff is making us more disconnected than ever as a society. So if it makes us disconnected as, from a friendships perspective, what's it doing from a relationship point of view?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we know from lots of research on these social media companies is they make you feel like there's connection there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they are feeding a piece of that. And that's on purpose for them because they know that when you feel a connection, you return to it. So people follow people because they feel a connection to this person who has zero connection back. Now, there are pieces of this that have always been true. And and so what we're seeing is it's just on steroids that this is happening now. Our human brain does shortcuts all the time of how we feel connected to other people. And it's just that it's being exploited by these companies. And so, why are we being exploited? Well, I mean, when people say, well, I mean, it can't be anything wrong with it. It's free, like social media company. I'm like, if something is free,
There's
you're the
obviously a
product.
catch. You're the product,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're the product. And so there's no free ride. And so that's the whole tendency for these companies is to go, how can we have your eyeballs and your attention as long as possible because you're the product. So we want that. And couples forget that, so the ways that happens are different, but the propensities of people being distracted by other things is no different. So I was talking with a person. She was interviewing me for a professional group, and she said, so we have this thing where and it was teachers, and they're like being contacted by parents all the time in the evening and everything. And I said, do you know what this is? And she said, what? And I said, this is everybody else's agenda. That's what that is. You get a message on it, you get an email on it, you're watching social media, whatever, that's somebody else's agenda. And you've got to decide how much of their agenda are you going to take, or are you going to make sure you're intentional about returning attention to what matters? And I would say the marriage relationship matters. Now, that doesn't mean that you never use your phone. There's too much that we can do to be productive and for entertainment too. It's just that we don't often recognize the threat of that. As soon as I pick it up, I'm on somebody else's agenda. I mean, it's kind of funny as I picked it up, I've got like 4 notifications. I'm like, huh, better check on that soon, right? And that's somebody
Yeah.
else's agenda. They chose to send that to me, right? And so, yes, that's dangerous. Porn, is that dangerous? Yes. Is it more available? Yes. It's been an issue for a long time, though, in different ways. It's become much more available and much more graphic and much more everything. But that's been a distraction that goes back, I don't know how far. I mean, magazines for sure when I was a kid were, I had friends say, I can't believe I found this stash in, my parents' room or wherever. I'm like, well, it was there then. So has it changed in how it's available? Absolutely. And we know that there are people who fall into that. And we know there are people who fall into addiction of that. There is still the fact that one of the things that draws humans into anything is feeling like there's some level of connection that gets that brain going. And if the connection is sexual or emotional or excitement or whatever, we're drawn to it. So we do have to be aware of that.
That's my worry about it because, like you say, when people are feeling disconnected in the relationship, they're looking at all these different sources on phones, like pornography is the good example, and feeling this fake connection with something else that's not real and stage and just not a representation of real life. And for me, that's just a slippery slope for somebody to go down, especially
For
if
sure.
someone could be
Yeah.
addicted to it.
Yeah, and so here's the problem is the slippery slope is ever increasing in society. And it's not going to turn back. We know that. So we have to ask some questions of how do we as individuals and couples want to deal with that? Like how do we want to be clear about that? I don't think it's ever been more important. Long before there was a smartphone or anything else, I was talking to couples about, have you talked about what the boundaries are that you each agree to protect your relationship? And almost never had they had an in-depth conversation about that. Now it's even bigger because this needs boundaries too. And so they haven't talked about it in real life, thinking about it in terms of what's on a phone or somewhere else is just one more layer to have a discussion about and an agreement about.
Because when we talk about porn and relationships, the way I see it at the minute, it's not something. It's quite a modern-ish addiction. You've got if someone has a problem with booze or drugs, for example, I feel like that's something they could sit with their partner with and talk to them about it and say, "Oh, I've got a problem with booze and drugs," and the other person might kind of understand that because it's a socially accepted thing-ish, and the other half would be very supportive. Whereas if someone sits down and says, "I've got an addiction to porn," then that's kind of a difficult one because it's not something that people talk about publicly with
Mm.
each other.
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, and the field is trying to figure that out. There's even discussions about what do we call addictions anymore? I mean, how do we define what that is?
Yeah,
How to process addictions of whether it's gambling or something else. But my way of understanding is whatever is causing a problem for you doesn't serve you. Right. So those substances don't serve our health or whatever. These processes don't serve our relationships or ourselves. Porn doesn't serve a relationship. And so people have to have some awareness of this is getting in my way. And where that lands for them is a relationship piece. Addictions, we know. I mean, so I have a pet theory that humans are built on addictive genes, which served us really well when the things that we would be addicted to is like sweet stuff. When the end of the growing season is coming, we would be cramming as much sweet fruits and whatever else we could get to get us through the winter. And so we have that built into us. It's just that it wasn't readily available. I could, go get straight sugar from the store anytime I want to. Now, that hasn't been the case. So, a very modern kind of thing. And so, addiction is something we have a propensity to, much less when we are trying to use something to make us feel better, right? So, our ancestors would have had it as a survival strategy of basically kind of fattening up for the cold winter around sweets and things like that. Now we have such a wide array of things that are around us that we can get pulled in by them, and it's not just survival. It can feel like that to somebody who's addicted, but now there are pieces that we have built more and more addictive. I mean, drug companies have figured out ways of dealing with addictive tendencies for people. Certainly, um, alcohol companies and tobacco companies and vaping companies have figured out how can we make this to make sure it's addictive, but those same elements go into lots of other things. We can watch streaming companies trying to figure out how to get you to the next one that has a kind of an addictive framing to it, right? And so there are lots of ways that that fits in that are misused because of that propensity we have. It's become a commercial issue, and therefore it interferes with us.
Excellent, thanks, Lee. Let's flip this round to the more positive side of marriage now. So, what this is probably the most simplest question you'll get on this podcast. What is a good marriage? You kind of talked about communication, but is there anything else that we've not discussed that makes a good foundation for um, a marriage?
Yeah. The biggest piece is that we see each other as a team together, that we're here to support each other, that we're here to work together as well as we can. That's the simplest piece. Like we're on this. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be rosy. It means that when things are tough, we hang together as a team, right? So that team is not the strategy of winning at life. It's the strategy of hanging together and being with each other. So simplest way is to say we see each other as a team where I bring my best self to that and we're trying to move forward. You'll notice I didn't say love in any of that because that's the piece that often hangs people up of going, I don't feel love for this person anymore. And they didn't realize what happened in the shift. So I don't rely on an emotional feel at the moment. I, that's not to say that people shouldn't feel love towards each other. So I want to kind of walk on this, but the part that frames it is to go, I am a part of a team. I'm going to be on that team. I've committed to that team and I'm going to bring my best self to it. That creates the potential for the love to hang in there and even return and even grow because that's there. The safety of that is there.
How long have you been married? You mentioned it off the recording, but could we talk about how long you've been married?
38 years.
38 years, wow. And I think it's fair to say that you feel like you've changed or your relationship has changed over that time, hopefully for the better as well.
Every marriage goes through a number of marriages. I would say I've been through a number of marriages all to the same person, right? Because where we started together, my wife and I got married, and a week and a half after we got married, we started grad school, both of us. And so we were in grad school together, which meant that there wasn't a lot of time for work. So we were doing all the jobs we could, working all the time, weekends and evenings and everything else to support ourselves so we could go be in grad school. And so we had to lean on each other for that. So that was a period of time. When my wife finished, I was continuing training. By that time, I was also clinically working, but with the limited amount because I was clinically working while I was in school. So she had a job she's actually a therapist now, but as a social worker. And then we had kids. And so that's a whole different stage. And then as our kids were growing up at different points, that's a whole different stage. How you deal with babies is a different marriage than how you're dealing with school age kids and how you're dealing with high school kids. And then empty nest is a whole nother place. And moving, we moved 4 years ago to be closer to family after our kids had left. And there was after the pandemic, which was, by the way, a whole nother marriage for a lot of people, right? You had to
Yeah.
figure out how to navigate that. And you're either on the team or you weren't on the team. I mean, I had people saying, we have no choice but to be the team. Tell us how to do that. We can't leave now. And so that changed a lot of people, and it was a different marriage. But we left the city that we spent our entire married life together and moved to where we had family, but none of our friends and none of our routines because we wanted to be closer to family. That's a whole different marriage. When we're staring down now of, okay, I mean, I'm 60, she's 60, we're kind of going, okay, what is it going to look like in the next chapter? When she finishes work, I'm not sure I ever will, but when we move through that process, what is that going to look like? And so those are multiple marriages within a marriage. So you're constantly asking the question, where are we and how do we continue to work on the connection? Where are the danger points? Where are the opportunities to build that? And so, yeah, I mean, you might make it a few years. The danger is believing you're in the same marriage you were a few years ago, just because circumstances haven't changed, but things along the way change, whether it's parents dying or a change in friends or maybe a new hobby or interest or new career or problems with kids or I mean all these things bring in new challenges that reorient you or fail to reorient you to that relationship. So for us it's been a reorientation each time.
Never true a word said about different marriages within a marriage. I've been married 10 years, July tomorrow, isn't it? Yeah, I'm married 10 years next month. And you're right, because we got married and we had a year or two on our own. Then we had our first child, and we moved house and sold the house we're in and moved house with one child. Then during the pandemic, like you say, we had our second child. And then we're negotiating that through, navigating that through the pandemic. Then we're raising toddlers, and now they're proper children. So yeah, in the space of less than 10 years, I've had about four, five, six marriages.
Yep.
And
And they're much more in front of you.
a bunch more
But
in front
that's
of you, yeah. Me.
so here's the thing. So I've talked, excuse me, I talked about that being a team, being a we. And if you are staying on track with that, you see how things are changing and you can work through that together. If you are not working together as a team, you don't notice the changes that are going on until something catches your attention and you're like, where are we? Like what happened there? There's a wake up that happens when people don't track. And because they're disconnected, they don't notice the changes that are going on in a spouse. And that's where they get lost. So the connection is what allows you to continue down the path. The disconnection is allow you to think that you're both down that same path, but your spouse is off on another path.
Excellent, excellent. How often would you say you're seeing couples where the relationship is being hit by friction due to work stress? So one or both um, parts of the couple are experiencing some sort of stress and that's affected the relationship, whether, I don't know, somebody's overworking too much, or like you say, there was I think you mentioned something about a substitute for some for love or communication. People working too much to substitute for something else. You said that a few minutes ago, I think. How often are you
Yeah.
finding people are couples are having issues due to work stress, and how's that
S-
affecting both?
So let's go back to me talking about the fact that there are symptoms that people think are the problems, and that connection or disconnection is what creates the scenario, the disconnection, the pause button marriage, and then use that as a frame. So if you are disconnected, then it's easy to always be focused on when your spouse isn't there and should be there, taking care of the kids, how you're having to do more than your share. If you're connected, you can have a conversation about that. And you can be in each other's corner for work stress, right? You're able to say, hey, I'm with you on that. I'm sorry, it's hard. If you're not connected, then those are issues. So I would put that in the category of It's a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem.
Why do you think some couples also navigate challenges better than others? Going back to the affair um, topic, for example, there'll be a couple, one person will have an affair, and then one per, the part that's been cheated on will feel like it's the end of the world, can't possibly forgive, no matter how sorry the other person is. Another couple, same thing, an affair again. The other person is easily forgiven that person. What's going on there? Why is some people much more forgiving than others?
So I would guess that anybody who gets to forgiveness after infidelity, it's not an easy forgive. They decided to get through it, and were able to see a route through it. Some people don't have the information. So um, this is one of those things that I've been trying to work on really my entire career. There's a back in the late 80s, early 90s, Charles Snyder was a psychologist. He was talking about hope. And the reason that caught my attention was for at the beginning of my career, I worked as a chaplain in a hospital for several years. It was a training and supervision and all kinds of things that were involved in it. And one of the things that happens with a chaplain is you're called in when people have gotten bad news. That is a very frequent event. And in fact, I covered second shift so 3 to 11 was my shift. That meant that the doctors were handing off bad news to me. The family just got this bad news and I'm going home. So you clean it up. And the nurses were like, we don't know what to do this person. Their family's gone home for dinner. You talk to them. And repeatedly, I would have the staff going, you've got to help them find hope. And I remember after a while, I heard that so often. The doctor's like, they got to have hope, got to have hope. And so I started going, what do you mean by that? Like, tell me what you want me to give them. You've just given them devastating news. What do you want me to do to make them feel hopeful at this point? And they were, oh, they just got to have hope. So I was doing a lot of research on what does that even look like? Like, what does that mean? Charles Snyder created the hope formula, and there are three pieces to the formula. One is you have to know where you want to go. Like you have to have a destination in mind, and you have to have some clarity about that. So I'm going to kind of step by step apply it to a marriage. You got to know what kind of marriage you want to build if you want to head in that direction. Like, what does it look like? Not just like I want to stay married or I don't want to get a divorce or I don't want to whatever. Those are not very clear. I want to have a loving, respectful marriage where we're connected and enjoy each other. And that's much more specific, right? I mean, we can fill in those blanks and paint the picture. It's paint by numbers. So that's the first piece is you have to have clarity of where you want to get to. So I want to use another analogy. If I want to take a trip, like if I go and go, you know what? I'm going to go to the beach. I could just say, well, I want to go to the beach, but there is a lot of beach in the United States. So I need to pick a spot that I want to go to with clarity. Like that is the place I want to go because I'm going to punch that into my GPS, right? So now I have clarity. Then you also, and I'm going to jump the middle one and go to the last one, you have to have a willingness to go there. So it doesn't matter how much I want to go to the beach. If I'm not willing to get in the car and make the trip, I'm not going to get to the beach. There's no way to get there. For hope, you have to be willing to do what it takes to get to that point. So we've got I know where to go and I'm willing to get there. The mid part of that is one that many people don't have. It's only, I mean, I can help somebody figure out what they want their marriage to be. I can help them with that, but that really is a piece that they pull out of themselves. I can't do anything to make somebody want to do that. That is on 100% on them. But the middle one is you have to have a way to get there. Like you have to know how to get there. And that's missing for a lot of people. That's what I've tried to build my career on is creating the path. Like what does it look like to recover a marriage, to recover from an affair, to build a thriving life? What does it look like? What are the pieces, the elements of that? Because we don't get a lot of education on that. There's nobody who sits down and explains this is how to have a happy marriage. mainly because the people who are about to get married aren't interested in that because they think they already know what to do, as we talked about earlier. They
Yeah.
think they already have that, right? And so that not knowing it means that we are at a problem point before we go, oh, I don't know how to do this. And then we've got to figure out what to do. So the roadmaps to get there. Like the other day, I did go to the beach. I visited a friend. I knew what beach he was at, and I was like, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to make that drive and drive back. And I punch it into my app, and it pops up and it tells me all the ways I need to go to get there. So now that gives me a rough estimate. Now I'm still going to have to deal with a closed road or whatever, but I have a rough estimate of how to do that. Same in a marriage. They have to have that information. And so part of what helps couples, now I'm finally rounding around to get to your question, why do some get there and some don't? Some manage to either figure it out or they find the information that helps them do it because they're willing to do it and they know where they want to get to. And what they're looking for is that information. If they're not willing to do it, the information is irrelevant.
Yeah.
The goal is really irrelevant. That's nothing's going to happen. But if they're willing to get there, then they need a roadmap on how to do it. And then it's a matter of following the map. And they've already committed to doing that. Like they have the willingness to follow the map if they just had it.
We said the word "we" was very big in this podcast recording. I think the second one is hope. That was a really, really that really popped into my mind. We said the word hope because I think if anyone gets anything out of this recording, it is hope because that's why I do what I do to teach the inside understanding to people and have guests on like yourself is to give people hope because I think that's an underestimated thing for people. Hope really keeps kind of people positive and going rather than, staring at the abyss of, despair, especially in a marriage
Hmm.
and work stress.
Well, and that's part of why I love that formula so much because I can sit with somebody and say, okay, these are the three parts. What do you not have? There are a couple of things there that I can help you formulate where you want to get to. I can help you formulate wherever it is in life. We can formulate what that looks like for you. That doesn't guarantee you're going to get there, by the way. It does give you a direction, though, right? That's the starting point. And if you're willing to do it, then we've just got to fill in that middle piece. But it breaks it down into there are three things we have to have, three elements of this formula. And if you have all three of those, A, that gives you hope. B, it gives you direction. And C, it gives the process to get there. But that's that's what I love about the formula. I can sit there with somebody and say, okay, you don't have a framework. Let's figure that out. You're clearly willing to get there and you know what you want to get to. Let's talk about the framework. For some people, they are willing to do it. We just have to figure out what it is that they're with clarity what they're trying to get to, and then that points to how you get there.
What advice would you give to somebody who is thriving and successful at work, yet when they come home from to their marriage, it's completely the opposite. Um, what advice would you give someone so they can thrive in both worlds, both their working world and their relationship world? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is they're obviously doing something right at work if work's going well, and I guess there's some principles there that they could put into their relationships as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are some uh, differences that I think people struggle with, right? So let's say I go to work and I know how to do that job, but I don't know how to do this marriage thing.
Yeah.
And I feel successful at work. Where am I going to put my energy? Right. So that's a piece of that we tend to put our attention where we feel like we are going to be successful. That's just kind of human nature. And so there's that factor. So then it's a matter back to that framework thing. If they don't have a framework, they need a framework because they have that at work. That's one of the reasons. I mean, when they know what to do at work, they do it. That's one. Another is that there are lots of measurements that happen for a lot of people at work. Like they will measure your performance. Let's see how
Absolutely.
productive you are. We don't have that in marriages unless you have a conversation. How are we doing? What could we do that would make us feel more connected, right? There are conversations you could have, but most people don't have them. And so you're like, yep, I go to work. I got my checklist. I know what I need to get done today. I know what I'm trying to do. It's all with clarity. And somebody often in many jobs can say, and here's how you're doing. And so that's this got some clarity to it. If you're a salesperson, you can see your sales quota. You can see how you're doing on that. If you're an engineer, you can see how your measurements are doing and how those pieces are coming together. If you're a doctor, you have some feedback on how productive you are and how your patients are doing and all those things. So there, I mean, that tends to be some feedback clues that we're getting at work that you may not be getting in the marriage unless you're looking for them. So we've already given a couple of those measurements here. Like, how connected are you? And there are three levels of connection. So, how are you doing on those connections? It's physical, emotional, and spiritual. Like, how are you doing in each of those arenas? That would be a measurement method. We've talked about the team. How's the team doing? Not are you winning everything, because that's not how it works, but how are you playing together? So, I'll just do the team thing a little bit. I play pickleball, been playing for about 4 years, and um, I think a lot about the partnership that's on the court. I don't play singles, I play doubles. And as soon as I walk on the court, I'm watching my partner to see how I can best help them play their best. At the optimal, they're doing the same to me, but I just know for me, I can see. So I'll watch how they take the balls and how they're dealing with them, and go, okay, I need to cover this, or maybe I don't cover this because they love to do that, right? I'm going to let them do their thing, and so as I'm watching that, I'm learning like how do we work together as a team? Am I going to win every pickleball match? Not in any way that is important. I mean, yesterday I played with a group for about an hour and 15 minutes. I lost two matches out of six, so I did pretty well. I mean, I would say I did pretty well in that, but didn't really care. It's like I was playing the game. I was playing the game to be the best I could, and for my partner and me to play the game. And so it was four of us, so we kept rotating around. So I can't be enemies with the person I'm playing against. That's not the whole point. The whole point is how do I play with the person beside me? If we lose together. If we win together. As opposed to me watching someone on the pickleball court that's like, well, that was your fault. You messed up on that. You should have done better. Years ago, I guess I'd been playing for less than a year. I was put in it was supposed to be a social event. And this is why I remember it so well. It's supposed to be a social event. And I stepped out, and this guy was like a 4+ on the rating, which is, he's a solid player. He's close to a 5. I was not even rated, and we're supposed to have this social game, and he is slicing and dicing the other side, and I am not. Like they would come back, and I would miss it or whatever, and he turns to me and he said, "You've got to play better." And I looked at him. I'm like, "Do you not think that I'm doing my best here? Like I'm playing at my optimal. This is it. There's no better." And so after it was over, I was like, you said to play better. Do you know how unhelpful that is to somebody? Because you didn't say, hey, you might do better this way, or hey, would you like a little coaching on that? None of that. It was, you need to play better. I've watched couples do exactly that to each other
I was just thinking the same thing
constantly.
in the context of a couple. That's probably the wrong thing to say to your spouse as well. You need to do better.
You need to do better. Calm down. That's a you need to do better, right? So there are that's a missing element of going, hey, we're in this together. How do we support each other? So one measurement for couples is how supportive do we feel of each other? Let me add another piece in because I think it's worthwhile. A recent book came out that kind of encapsulated this in one word, and it was mattering. And the person was talking about how central to the human experience it is to feel like we matter somewhere. Do we matter to the world in some way? And marriage is built on mattering to our spouse and them mattering to us. So we can have some conversations about, do I make you feel like you matter? Do you make me feel like I matter? Those are important conversations that couples can have that help them recalculate and reset the relationship. If I can do things to make my spouse feel like she matters, that's important. If I can say, hey, that makes me feel disregarded or like I don't matter, that's important too. There are conversations we can have when we know that that's part of the calculation.
I'm going to rewind a bit because something that's stuck in my brain. What you've said is about the metrics in the workplace. You're right. You've got all these stats and that kind of thing that measures how well you're doing. Like you say, you don't have that in a relationship. All you've kind of got really is how it feels. That's the only really. That's probably one of the only inner compasses you've got in terms of, are you still
Is
there?
that, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah,
I
I
was
thought
at,
we
I,
lost
I
each other.
didn't know if it was there a question or you were just observing that there,
Ah,
the
no,
lack of.
it just I stopped because it froze my side of the recording.
Oh yeah, no. So you're right that emotions are feelings. Emotions are something I hold lightly because they shift so quickly.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah,
And so I don't know that I see that as the only measurement. It's the most readily available measurement. And so one of the things for lots of people, in fact, I have this thing, I call it a partnership meeting that I suggest that couples do. The partnership meeting is a once a week meeting, and it covers some areas that keep the silly things from popping up. You talk about any financial things that are coming up because you might think your spouse knows that the big bill is coming, but they may not. And so you have a conversation about, are there money things we need to know about? There's a schedule issue. You want to make sure your spouse knows if you're going to be available or not be available. Like that's important. Scheduling causes a lot of conflicts that just don't need to be there. And then the third area is, how are we doing? This is not a therapy session without a therapist, which is what I see a lot of couples try to do with each other. They just therapize each other. That's not helpful. It is like a more like how a business does things. Like, where do we have problems? Let's problem solve them. And when you do it that way, you don't get stuck in the here's what you're doing wrong, here's where you're messed up, here's where you have all your issues. It's a how do we deal with that? So, how are we doing? Well, I'm feeling a little disconnected. Okay, that's an observation. Feeling a little disconnected. The follow up is, what could we do that would help you feel more connected? That's different than going into what's wrong with you that you're feeling disconnected. Did you have some problem in your childhood? Or what's wrong with you that you're not connecting with me? Did you have a problem in your childhood? I mean, these are the therapy without a therapist present kind of things that couples do instead of how can we deal with that? How can we improve that? Now, couples who are deep in a crisis can't do that because there's not enough connection to hold it. This is something that couples can do when they're in a pretty good place and they're just trying to kind of make it better. Having those conversations is easy for them because they have enough connection to support that. Having that kind of conversation when you're disconnected really is going to be counterproductive. And it's more appropriate for somebody to try to start building the connection back up so that it can then hold that relationship talk.
excellent. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, sorry about before. For some reason, it froze this side, but that's why I stopped talking mid-flow. But just a couple more questions, 'cause I'm getting conscious of your time. What's one thing you wish every couple understood? I mean, you might have mentioned it before, but there's a chance to
Being a
elaborate on
team,
it even further.
you are a team, right? That is the central thing. If there's one thing that people can use to start turning a corner is to go, we're a team, and to view you as the team, right? And so you are. So let me just say it: you are a team. That doesn't mean you're a high performing team. And so to say I am a team is the beginning point of the so how do we want to perform, not the end of that, right? So you can assume that you're a team. There are some pretty dysfunctional or non-functional teams around that we can watch in sports all the time, right? So the question is, can you be more functional as a team, a better supportive team? And so that's one. And the other is, are we connected? Because you can be a team and be disconnected and just going through the motions. The connection is where you feel close to somebody. Like it matters, not like you're just functionally being a team, but that you want to be a part of that team and you want to be with this person. That comes through the connection. So those two pieces, I'm a team and we're connected.
Connection, hope, and we. Three big words from this recording. If listeners could take away one insight from today's conversation, what would it be?
Be a team and be connected. That's just going to drill that down. That's such a central piece for that. So back to that I don't see couples coming in for help that have a strong sense of being a we. It just doesn't happen. They can because they can navigate the other things. We're in this together. When they are not a we, I see them because they've turned against each other. So working on the team and being mindful of the attention you put into the relationship or the connection that you build will keep you out of harm's way. And for people who have gotten into trouble, that creates a direction to go from there.
Excellent, excellent. I just want to wrap up by just talking about the rest of your 2026 plans, where people can find you, and your book. So three things there. 2026, where people can find you if they want your services, and the books you've written. You can tell us a bit about those.
Yeah, that's a lot of so let's start with 2026 because I while I'm creating some new stuff, my overall theme has always been about creating resources for people to save and improve their relationships, and that's not going to change. I said I'm not sure I'm retiring. That's because I don't see a reason to stop doing that
That
kind
just
of
shows you
work.
love what you do. That's the case.
So we'll keep doing that kind of work, and I do a lot of direct coaching with people, but I also create my podcast and other resources, and I'm writing a book currently. So that's 2026. My books are ways for people to work on their relationship. And it's true, my courses and my books, way for people to work on their relationships and their life. So my two areas are how to have a thriving relationship and how to have a thriving life. And by the way, I see those as fitting together. It's hard to thrive in your relationship if you're not thriving in the rest of your life. And it's hard to thrive in the rest of your life if your relationship is in trouble. So those two
It
things
seems like
go
they go hand in
kind of
hand, both
together.
of them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have three books that are more about the individual thriving, thrive principles, and the immutable laws of living, and the forgive process, which lays out how do you forgive something, even if somebody's not apologizing. And then I have four books themselves that are on relationships, and those books are like the affair book, a specific area. I have one on the marriage fail point, which is why marriages fall apart. Then I have a book that uses that kind of that formula of hope to talk about how to move forward. And then I have the book on three simple steps to save a marriage. Simple is not the same as easy, so just to clarify that. You can find those at savethemarriage.com/books. That'll put you on the page. It shows you that and a couple of journals that I've created. So savethemarriage.com/books. But then I have courses for people who are in trouble. I actually have two courses for people at two different stages. One is my Save the Marriage system, which is when you are in a true crisis, like you think you might be headed for divorce, and that's at savethemarriage.com. Just savethemarriage.com. Don't try to be fancy with where I send people. So that's if people are in a crisis, but some people are in kind of that chronic disconnection. And so I created an app. It's been half a year ago, I guess, when it came out, maybe a little more, that's about unpausing your marriage. And that's at unpauseyourmarriage.com, unpauseyourmarriage.com. And that goes on either an Android or an iPhone, and allows people to work through a process to learn how to reconnect. It gives them trainings on how that happens and then steps to do that and a couple of daily exercises to do it. What I love about an app is one of the things that we talked about earlier, it's other people's agendas. Well, you can make it your own. So if you do the app, it will send you a notification to remind you in the morning and the evening to do your little exercise of the day to get the process going. So that's unpauseyourmarriage.com. That is designed specifically for people who are not in a deep crisis. That's when you go to savethemarriage.com.
That's really clever. It's refreshing to think there's notifications out there like that rather than like a random Facebook notification or an Instagram
Yeah,
notification. That's just rubbish, basically.
yeah, right. Some can help you, but most get in your way.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Lee. I really, really hope that a lot of listeners get a lot out of this, and as I don't, there might not be many listeners out there where their relationships are in that dire straits, but hopefully by listening to this, they can make their relationship as strong as possible, and that's what we're both trying to aim for there. Really, really enjoyed our
Absolutely. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you. If this episode resonated with you, then feel free to connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn, where I share more insights on work stress, leadership pressure, and the inside out understanding. You can also contact me directly via email at onethoughtaway1988@gmail.com. And if you're navigating pressure in your own career, you can download my free work stress guide using the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care, and remember, work stress might feel real in the moment, but it isn't who you really are. Thank you.